We're going to record this so that we can use it for many of you who were unable to join. A handful of folks asking me if we could record and share this. So it will be available to those who registered. We'll send the link out and we'll put it on our YouTube page. Certainly can keep it restricted just to the access for folks who need it. So in case there's something there for Patrick, we want to certainly use it as a resource, but not broadcast it necessarily to the world for your purpose. I appreciate you being here with us today. I'm going to ask, outside of logistics, please just keep yourself on mute until we get to the end of a section, and then our speaker will ask for some questions, and you're welcome to come on mic, ask your questions, or drop them in the chat box. Shannon and myself will be monitoring that and making sure we get questions answered in between sections. We'll also be saving the chat box, so if there are questions we haven't really gotten to, our staff will take them back. We might try to work with Patrick and others and make sure that we get an FAQ or some type of follow-up back out to you if they don't get addressed today. So use the chat box and the mic in between sections. We'll be monitoring it. At this time, I'm going to ask our first Vice President, Wayne Davis, to join and offer some comments, and really big appreciation to Wayne for helping us make the connection to the speaker. Wayne, I've got you on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Got it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate y'all taking time out of your busy schedule, both staff, directors, and others. We're very fortunate today to have Patrick Teal. Patrick is the Director of Human Resources at James City County. We were fortunate at the Colonial District to have Patrick come to our Operations Committee meeting several months ago, and he gave a presentation like he's going to give in a few minutes here to us. And I was just so impressed by his wealth of knowledge and experience. And I came back that evening and I thought, you know, this would be really good if I could reach out to him and see if he would consider working with Kendall and I and doing this so we could share some of this knowledge with all of y'all. So today we have him. And like I said, we probably had at that Operations Committee meeting, we probably had 8 out of our 12 directors there. So they really appreciated it as well. So I think you've heard at some of the area meetings, Kendall and the leadership team, we're committed to focusing and making human resource topics a priority. We recognize that we need it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
All right, thank you. And welcome, everyone. One thing I'd like to say starting out is soil and water conservation. As a Virginian who eats, it's very important to me the work that you do every day to keep not only our soil in tip-top condition and folks understand what the challenges are, but obviously as a water-based coastal community, it's important for us to have that type of water both inland and close to the coast that really provides an ideal ecosystem. So thank you again. As mentioned, I'm here to talk about human resource trends for 2023. That was the topic I was given. First section I'd like to start off with is under recruitment. And one thing I probably don't need to tell anyone in the room who has a position that participates in the hiring process, we are having an enormously difficult environment to hire experienced, highly qualified folks at a rate we can afford. And so one of the things that most of us are looking at from a human resource perspective is focusing on the skill-based hiring. And what that means is you're hiring for someone as potential and you develop. So in the past, we might have asked very specific questions that required 1 or 2 years experience within a position. Now you may want to reframe some of those questions based on the quality of your applicant pool to be skill-based. So giving them a scenario that might happen at work and ask them how they would work through it. And even though they may not know the specific terminologies or the specific equipment used, they have the cognitive ability to walk through a thought process that matches the skills you're looking for in that job. Then you can orient them to the particular technology or the particular academia that's attached to that task, as opposed to hiring someone that may have some of that limited experience, but their adaptability in the position and for future needs you have really isn't there. Another thing we're looking at in this tough recruitment environment, where in the past we might have had 40 applicants for one opening, we are really looking at more in this day and age in the last 2 to 3 years, more like 12 applicants for every one opening. It's less than half of what it's been in the past. So some of what we need to offer are the things people are asking for today, and that's a hybrid work, where an individual may be able to telework part of that time and then work in the office part of that time, giving them flexibility to meet their personal needs as well as provide the professional work that you require. Flexible schedules are another. There may be a 2-hour gap in the middle of the day where the individual needs to pick children up from a bus, or they have aging parents they need to take care of and take the doctor's appointments. But if you're able to modify their schedule and maybe be able to work a little later, but take a longer midday break, that gives them that flexibility and ownership over their schedule. And then providing non-full-time options. Obviously, all of us are trying to draw from a smaller pool. So the more options you can provide, such as non-full-time, you may be able to attract different groups such as retirees, stay-at-home parents, folks going to school part-time, and then looking at any other benefits you can really offer that works with your bottom line. And so, for example, for us, it's the optional benefits we've looked at this past year. We offered a short-term, long-term disability for people who are not eligible for that in their current VRS plan. It is something they have to pay for, but it's an offering that we take care of, and it goes through their payroll. So you can consider other benefits that may be of assistance. We also this year are updating our policy to include 2 floating personal days to really give folks the idea that if they have a holiday that they celebrate that's not a recognized federal holiday, that we're giving them that option in our benefits package. Then, of course, salary pressures are everywhere. All we have to do is drive by a local McDonald's to see they have $14.97 an hour starting wage. So that can be pretty hard when some of our positions are actually entry in that area. So looking at other options as you focus on your wage and trying to improve your pay scales. And those are things like we instituted signing bonuses this year, and those are refundable to us if they don't stay for a full 2 years, but creating those kind of incentives for people to sign on. It can also help folks that maybe are relocating. That signing bonus can be a way of helping pay for those relocations. Looking at differentials. So here at James City County, one of the things we do is if you're on a midnight shift, you're provided a 5% differential on top of your regular salary. When you leave the midnight shift, then that differential goes away. If you speak a second language, that we have a population that needs that second language, such as, for example, here, Spanish, we have approximately 10% of our population. So we offer a 5% differential if you're able to show proficiency in Spanish. And then, of course, for us, hazardous duty, folks who work with chemicals, who work with dangerous machinery, etc., we provide a hazardous duty supplement. And then counteroffers. Anytime one of your employees is indicating that they're in the process of a job offer and may be leaving, understanding your best tool for someone who's already trained is to offer a counteroffer to that if it's fiscally an option for you. The other thing we're all struggling with are new pipelines for talent. You can post your job on a few different job boards and you're going to get what we've been getting. So really looking into your community and association relationships. If you have an association for architects that some of your professionals belong to, for example, then that would be a great job board to tap into for an architectural opening. So think about your professional associations and do they have job boards or a place to post that information? And then, of course, your LinkedIn profile is going to have a lot of folks who share similar professional experiences to you, and that can be a great place. All of us can post a job once a month for free in LinkedIn. So I highly encourage you to develop that professional network and then post your jobs in those types of locations. Going to senior centers, doing your job postings through there. In our area, there's usually 1 or 2 senior job fairs each year. And then looking at developing an internship program, paid or unpaid, if you have the ability to do that, so that you can tap into local colleges' career centers and pick up folks that may down the line, once they graduate, be interested in more of your full-time openings. And then Virginia has a very strong veteran presence, and they also have a veteran hiring program. It's called V3, or Virginia for Excellence is another name for it. It's on the state Virginia Values Veterans website, and you can access that program. You can get interns paid by the federal government if they qualify. Those folks have a 6-month ability to go to an organization, still be paid by Department of Defense, and then do work for you to help transition to civilian employment once they retire from the military. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion, really looking at the variety of niche boards that are available depending on the groups you're trying to target. And then lastly, understanding that every job applicant's first experience with your culture in your organization is through the hiring process. So what do your job ads look like? What do they sound like? In the interview process, how quickly before they're notified for an interview? What is that interview process like? Who's sitting on the panel? Is it conducted virtually or in person? Is it working around your schedule or the actual interviewee's schedule? So how flexible you are in your culture, how much you value people's time, all of that will reflect in the process that you create. And then as you go through the references, final selection, all of that speed is obviously going to be very important simply because folks who are interviewing with you are likely interviewing with 2 or 3 other places. If it takes 2 weeks from interview to job offer, that's 2 weeks they may have already received the job offer and will no longer be available. So finding ways to tighten that process or stay in contact if you're genuinely interested in an applicant will show a lot about the value of your culture towards its employees. And then at this stage, I would open it up to any questions kind of talking about recruitment.
I don't have any questions in the chat box yet, but I would encourage anyone to come off mute and share your comments or questions.
Well, we can roll to the next one. And then if we get some combo questions, I think I can go back and kind of cover both sections together. So another place to look in our challenging environment right now is what is your employee well-being? Right now, we've moved into a culture of looking at a whole person rather than just your employee. There was a days back in the past when we said, leave your personal at home. And when you come to work, you're this particular notch or this particular cog in a wheel. That doesn't work in our current cultural environment simply because folks want to bring their whole person to the job every day. They have particular interests, they have a life outside of work, and they want work to complement and work with that whole person, not just with a piece of that person. So as an employer, we would be looking at employee engagement. How well does your employee, technically for employee engagement, how well do they feel their job contributes to the bottom line of the organization? So if your mission is to improve the quality of Virginia citizens' lives through this, and this, how does that connect to what that employee does every day? That's a level of engagement, knowing that they have some contribution to the bigger picture of why we all work for a particular organization. And we'll talk more later in, I believe, the third item about how to measure that. You want to look at your mental health offerings. Obviously, coming out of COVID, we're hearing not just at a school level, but at a person level, that there's still quite a bit of trauma from an unforeseen, unprecedented pandemic for at least 3 years. So mental health services are important to provide as an employer, and also to encourage employees to access for both personal and professional reasons. That way they feel confident that they have the tools to succeed in the workplace, as well as in their personal lives. And then looking at, can you offer physical health through nutrition and exercise? Example I'll give you, there's a ride your bike to work day coming up, I believe in May. And we're allowing employees to leave an hour early and join a group bike ride on the Capitol Trail. So finding opportunities to not only provide a thank you luncheon occasionally, those types of things, but also healthy options for your staff to engage with each other outside of the workplace, but possibly during work hours. And then nutrition, helping folks understand, for example, we provide 3 nutrition classes a year, healthy shopping, healthy cooking, healthy eating, those types of things. Really, again, as an employer, showing you see the picture of the person as a whole and not just their piece of the organization. And then financial education, that can be anywhere from, we have offerings through VRS that we can access. Our employee assistance program offers financial services, as well as regular seminars and webinars about financial education. Because if you're one car problem away from being evicted, it's going to be very difficult for that person to focus on their work successfully. And then back to diversity, equity, and inclusion. A good definition for that is diversity is recognizing that all of us are different in some way. We all bring something unique to the puzzle. Equity is everyone is treated fairly through our policies and our workplace design. And inclusion means everyone has an ability to be included if they choose. So thinking in inclusion, thinking of things like employee committees or recognition events, is everyone being included? If we all celebrate a particular holiday, does that leave anyone out of the picture? So really being able to focus in those 3 areas. Are you recognizing that all of us come from a different place, that everyone should have equal opportunity in the workplace, and everybody has an opportunity to participate where they would like? And then I think that opens us up for 2 sets of questions, if we have any about recruitment or employee well-being.
We have one in the chat box, and Anne, if you'd like to come off and ask it yourself, happy to offer you the microphone, but she jotted in the chat box on section A, when we were talking about 5% differential. The example given was handling chemicals. And she
Yeah.
said, I assume that would mean on a regular basis, but would you do monitoring dams and driving on roads to check district-owned dams during storm events or hurricanes, which may only happen once or twice a year?
There's a couple ways to do that. So recognizing that only happens 1 or 2 times a year, normally that's not going to rise to a regular differential. How we would define a regular differential would be no less than 10% of your time is spent in that particular environment. So if, for example, you're handling chemicals related to toxic cleanups, but that actually takes up 1/3 of the job, that clearly would be a differential. If it's once or twice a year, maybe no more than 20 hours, that's where we do what's called an incentive award. And that's where you go through a nomination process. The supervisor normally would nominate the employee for the incentive award, saying, wow, they really went out of their way, put themselves in a potentially dangerous situation, handled it really well. I'd like to recognize them with a $1,000 one-time bonus. So it's the percent of time on the job in a particular area where a differential separates itself from an incentive or a bonus for an occasional exposure to something that's well beyond their normal duties.
Great answer. Thank you. You also have the question in the chat box. How many hours annually per do you offer for mental health, bike rides, financial education?
That's a great question. I'd like to say I know for a fact, but what we have is through our employee assistance program, we offer usually 4 to 6 webinars or in-person events each year. And then for group activities, we have the month of, I believe it's March, is the Employee Wellness Challenge. So all in all, I would say it adds up to about 8 hours a month total if you put everything together.
Shannon, have I missed any other questions in the chat box? Screen share and want to make sure I captured everybody. Anybody want to come off and speak or ask a question? Otherwise, we'll keep an eye on the chat box.
Patrick, this is Keith Burgess with Monacan District.
I
I guess as we look at employee well-being, how do we minimize the abuse of some of the opportunities with working alternative schedules, with sick leave, with some of those things? I guess that's one of the biggest questions I've got, is not letting one person abuse a system to where then you have to adopt policies that restrict things, wanting to be flexible, wanting to be equal and fair, and just, but how do you do that? Of course, you've got a much bigger staff there than what we do, you know, with districts anywhere from 2 to 10 people, you know, 15 people.
Yeah, and I think that's a terrific question. Obviously, one bad apple can spoil a bunch. And when we talk a little bit about employee turnover, that brings up a big issue in employee turnover is not only how their boss relates to the employee. 70% of employees who leave because they want a better boss. That's a national statistic. So draconian rules, while sometimes important, would not be my recommended focus. My recommended focus on any of this is what the job needs to get done at the end of the day. Now, we can get into a little bit of quagmire over things like sick leave, because there are genuine reasons why a person may be absent from the office for a significant period of time. Remembering that there's the Family Medical Leave Act that provides job protection for a qualified employee for up to 12 weeks for their own or an immediate family member's significant health issue. But back to the general idea that someone may choose or unconsciously be abusing, it's going to be focused on what needs to be accomplished at the end of the day. Is the employee really abusing their flexible schedule if you need 10 things done and those 10 things get done? It isn't about sitting in a chair for 8 hours. That's not what we're paying anyone to do. So we should, as managers, have clear objectives about what needs to be accomplished. And if they are being accomplished, allow an employee the flexibility to do it in a way that works both for the organization and the employee personally. The other thing I would suggest is managers come at this from a perspective of not assuming it's going to be abused. The only time I like to write a policy, and I don't even like to write a policy, but when I write a policy, it's because more than one person has a question. How to do it, how to interpret it, how do we handle it? That's where a policy comes in. If one person has a question, nobody else does, that doesn't require a policy. So just because you may encounter one employee who doesn't really understand that sick leave isn't to be used to take your cat to the vet, that's a conversation, not a policy. You don't need to write that out. Nobody needs to get in trouble for that. That's a conversation between the manager and the employee that maybe their understanding what they read is different than yours. But once you've made that expectation clear, then you have to follow through. Again, is the work getting done? At the end of the day, that's the most important part of why we're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more question in the chat box. In terms of benefits, can you speak to what type of benefits should be offered to part-time employees? Anything from sick leave to even maternity benefits?
Yeah. We currently offer our part-time employees who work at least 1,040 hours a year. They do accumulate both a prorated portion of sick leave and personal time off. They have access to things like a 401, but obviously through VRS rules, they don't have access to any of the traditional plan benefits. And then we offer them side benefits because we can. For example, you can have a free rec center membership at our recreation center in James City County. You have access to discounts for summer programs for youth, also for adult classes. You have a discount on campgrounds. So there's a variety, but they tend not to be, they tend to be prorated and they tend to be much more limited because the assumption on a part-time position is this is not the person's primary source of income. So their primary source of benefits would also not be the part-time job. And what I've explained to part-time employees who ask, questions regarding that is part-time employees can say, I'm taking this job, but I want 3 months off each summer and I'll work my hours through these months. Full-time employees don't have that luxury. So you're trading flexibility for benefits.
Helpful. Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions, or have I missed one that might have been dropped in the chat box?
All right, and I'm pretty sure this isn't a story anybody on this call isn't aware of. We're in an unprecedented time of employee turnover. If you open up your phone and read through the news, there's always going to be a quiet quitting article, and whatever the phrase of the week is about folks leaving their jobs. We are in a high uptick of employment turnover in most of our industries. And it's important for us to know why in our particular workplace and how to respond to that. Number one, you should have exit interviews available for every employee that leaves your organization, from interns all the way through your highest level of position. It's one way you can create the tapestry of what people's experiences have been working there and why they're choosing to leave. You may also want to ask in this exit interview, in person, in paper. It can be a survey monkey if that's preferred, but you have many options for creating that exit interview. But you'll want to know where are they going and the reasons for that job change. You may find they're going to another state job, but you'll want to find out why. Is it more in their career path, or is it because they offer better pay? You can start to create that tapestry to understand where are people going and what could we do to respond to that. A big piece for most employees these days is continual job growth. Very few people are looking to do the same job for 30 years. So it's providing any and all options you can afford for employees to continue to move, develop, and learn in the job. One of the things we offer in a lot of our positions are career ladders. So you may come in at an inspector 1, and after you get 2 state certifications and you've been on the job a year, you now qualify for a 2nd level with a pay increase. And there may be a 3rd or 4th level. So if you look at our police, our fire, all of those have a minimum of 4 steps in a career ladder. So if you do a cost of living increase, the state says everybody's salary goes up 5%. This person can also achieve X, Y, and Z to move to level 2 in their career and get an additional pay increase. For us, they're 5%, except for in certain departments, it's slightly different, but most, it's a 5% jump when you move ahead in a career ladder. And it's really a celebration because you design that job description to show there are achievements required, be they educational, experience, technical. Once they reach those milestones, not only they get a pay recognition, but it's an opportunity for you to celebrate with them for that achievement. Acting assignments, when you have a vacancy and you may need a little time to get the job posted and go through the process and find the perfect person, or you have an employee with amazing potential and you want to give them a chance to try out a position, and you have the ability to provide them some on-the-job training. An acting assignment, it can be 1 or 2 months, and then at the 2nd month of acting in a higher role, you can provide that person with acting pay, for example. And that might be the temporary minimum pay of that particular position. And then they have some of the qualifications, hopefully, through that experience to actually apply for an interview for the job. So it's just going to build up your potential applicant pool by growing some of that internally. You can also act laterally. You can say, hey, I've always been focused in accounting, but I really want to do more budget development. Hey, here's an opportunity for us to do an acting assignment or possibly a job rotation. Maybe your person who does budget really hasn't spent time in accounting, and that's a great chance for them to switch roles for 6 months and gain some additional experience. Tuition reimbursement, as long as it's job related, we provide the federal maximum in tuition reimbursement, and it allows an employee to meet educational requirements for higher level positions that are within your organization. And then job growth can be hybrid work. It can be remote, non-full-time options, volunteer options. Those can create job growth for folks who maybe aren't in the normal career track, but you're giving them other places where they can enter the organization, and maybe their personal circumstances will change over time and they can become an applicant for one of your full-time openings. And then a flexible schedule, again, for continual job growth. this person may be pursuing a further education, and you're allowing them to do that by having a flexible schedule. And the last thing I recommend, and this can be in person, this is called a stay interview, where maybe once every 6 months you meet with your employees and you say, how was your experience? You're basically having a conversation with them as if they were leaving for another job. And it's the question of, well, what can I do to get you to stay? That's a stay interview. And an engagement interview, again, it can be an anonymous survey because you'll get a lot more difficult or shaded information that you might not get in person because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And it is important to know, are you filling the gaps? Are you meeting the needs? Are you providing the leadership and direction where people can feel they can be their best selves at work and be successful? So you can do those in person if that's the culture you have with your group, but also give them a non-in-person option to periodically give feedback. One of the things you can do are build questions like, do you feel that you understand how your work contributes to the mission of our organization? And then you can track that percentage of your workforce over time to see if some of the things you're doing, such as involving employees in certain decision-making, is actually increasing their engagement in the workplace. And then, of course, asking them, what could we do that would make you feel more like you're part of the key drivers and goals of what we're here to do? And I think I saw some questions pop up.
I think we've got a couple, and some we might not be able to address here, but at least toss them out there for thoughts even from other district staff. One reminder, Patrick certainly knows our district staffs can be small in terms of 2 staff to maybe 15, so that anonymous, I think, was a question of how, when you're a small staff, can you really try to seek that input while giving them that anonymous feel. I recognize that's a tough one, but if you want to address that, Patrick.
No, that's a fantastic question. And what I would say, what I would do, and what I've done for our smaller departments, is you pair up departments. Now, obviously, the data you get is not going to be as easily identifiable as belonging to a 2-person office when you partnered with 5 other districts. But at least you'll have some of that genuine information without people feeling like you'll know exactly who said what.
Great idea. We not only have 47 districts, often small, but we are divided into 6 areas, and perhaps that's something we can help. So there is some anonymity across the board, but it might be just on a little bit of a larger scale.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I had the question in here that I don't know that, Patrick, you can address, but we had, how can the district offer benefits like gym benefits, team building outings, being acceptable with the auditors? I'll be glad to talk with DCR and folks on that matter, but I do know of examples where districts have sent money and sent a group of 4 or 8 to our golf tournament to use as a team building day, or a district example I know a few years went to. So I have seen and heard of examples, but we'll make sure that they're doing it with auditor approval, and we'll certainly follow up to that one.
Well, and
Go ahead,
where
I'm
are
sorry.
your guys' benefits through? Are they through DHRM?
So no, each district is its own political subdivision, so their benefits are really determined by each district itself. And certainly they can participate in VRS if they choose to, but you could have different options and varieties. Each district would be looking at this with their own mindset of how to apply it.
I got you, because one of the areas, there are certain things, obviously, because we run the rec center, it's very easy for us to be able to offer that benefit. But for benefits that are less tied to our actual operations, for example, I'm trying to think of the most recent one. Oh, keeping cool for the summer. We have a lot of employees that work outdoors during the summer. Through our health insurance, we have a wellness program. And they provide a portion of money every year that we can utilize through their approval for employee wellness initiatives. So for that one, it was providing Gatorade type, not avoiding a brand name, but I can't think of another name, but it's an electrolyte supplement you can put in your water when you're sweating a lot and losing that. And so they get a little neck cooling kit and a bunch of other stuff to help deal with the heat. And the wellness program was able to cover that for us. So no, we wouldn't have to be audited for that. That's actually through our health insurance provider.
That's helpful. And I think you bring up a good point. So many of our districts are partners with their local communities, their local counties. So perhaps there's something there that you can approach your local county and ask, you might not be offering other benefits, but perhaps, there's a partnership there so that a gym benefit could be something that they could extend to the Soil and Water District employees too, since you're so small. We've got a few questions in here. I'm trying not to miss them. If I do, and it looks like I've skipped it, please come off mute and help me too. There was a question, would you hit on the tuition reimbursement again? You had mentioned something about federal in that sentence, and I think there were some questions around it.
Yeah, and I apologize for not knowing off the top of my head, but I can Google it real quick. There's a federal IRS limit on folks to provide tuition reimbursement, and they update it every year like all of the IRS limits. And so we provide the maximum up to the federal limit. If it goes over that, then they have to pay taxes as income. So you never want to cross that.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Megan, I hope that answers your question. Feel free to drop it in the chat box if needed. Patrick, what is the proper or appropriate level of time tracking for teleworking employees? And should we be required credit or hourly time tracking? What's the best for record keeping you would recommend?
It depends on whether the position is exempt or non-exempt. So for your non-exempt overtime eligible folks, you have to have 100% documented time tracking. The clock in, clock out every hour, anything over 40 is going to be time and a half compensable or comp time. But for your exempt folks, I really think it goes back to a little bit what we talked about. Are you focused on the number of hours or the deliverable? So if the person can do what a normal person does in 10 hours and can do it in 8, does it matter? I hope that answers it.
I think you've gotten there. I don't know if this one's one we can tackle either. But Patrick certainly recognizes the unique way districts are managed and that there's a board of directors locally elected and that staff really handle the day-to-day work. You talked a lot about engagement interviews and exit interviews and applying those to both. This question talks about assuming employees and directors and the value and benefit of possibly doing that for both, if you had any feedback, as well as how would you, when certainly, I know Patrick, you can probably relate this, there's some boards in your county, the dynamic between employees and directors in terms of any grievances or feeling like there might be bullying in an office. How do you capture and work through some of those obstacles?
Yeah, based on the way some folks are organized, we do run into that here as well. For example, I'll give you is we've fairly recently in the past year had a board member who crossed into the line of bullying some of the staff members during an open meeting, and it was witnessed by other folks. So that was actually handled at the appointment level, meaning that conversations were had with the body that appoints that board, letting them know that a line had been crossed, and conversation with that particular board member. If they would like to continue, the expectation is X, Y, and Z. So if you have an HR department or you have a governing body over a particular board, then that's where that engagement would normally happen, since you typically won't have an HR department to go to directly. And did I miss something on the first part of the question?
Would you or recommend use of exit interviews, engagement interviews with board members in addition to staff?
I do think so. Important to know. Well, I don't know how difficult it is to recruit and retain board members. So you may have some of those same questions if it is difficult, so that you know where to find new board members, how to keep them excited and engaged so that you don't have trouble finding them. But if that's not so much of the issue, and it's more the issue of how do they fit in the bigger picture of the workplace, I think asking them a possibly separate exit interview that talks a little bit more about their role and what they have observed from their role in relation to how a particular district is run, and what they would see are the needs for that district going forward. But again, anybody that participates with our organization, it's valuable to capture that insight if you can.
I think I've captured all the questions at this point. Anybody speak up if I'm wrong, but otherwise I'll shift to section D for you, Patrick, and catch back up afterwards.
All right, so this is our last section, and we'll talk a little bit about training and development, another tool in your workplace to help people feel like they want to stay, and also how to offer a package that's attractive to new employees. So I think we recognize that during COVID, all of us lost an enormous amount of people skills. Anywhere from everybody used to handshake, and a lot of people have gone back to it, but some of us still fist bump or elbow bump. It's some of the confusion comes in a lot of what we took for granted pre-COVID didn't make sense during COVID, and we asked ourselves, does it make sense post-COVID to go back to everything the way it was? So understanding that COVID put us all through a ringer, we didn't spend as much time socializing in person. Work became a lot of our only outlet other than our close immediate circle. And then understanding that there's generational differences, that if you don't, as a person, you don't talk on the phone, then coming into a job where you're required to talk on the phone, it's going to take some time to get good at, whereas someone from another generation may naturally spend time on the phone. That's how they were acclimated to their culture. So having those people skill trainings available, it may sound silly, but it's everything from polite behaviors in the workplace to how to deal with people in crisis. Any of us can open our phone and find a video of someone screaming at a person across the counter. So it's making sure that as part of your offerings, your basic people skills training is there, because it's not necessarily going to happen the way it maybe happened 15 years ago even. I think we've seen generation to generation that what we've taken for granted, thank you notes, and then that became thank you emails, and now it's ghosting. You don't really have everyone on the same page about how we interact with each other in the workplace. And then making sure, understanding we all learn differently, and we've all been acclimated to learn differently, and our schedules don't permit us all to necessarily learn in the same way. Hybrid learning, making offers such as what we're doing today, that we have that's online. It's going to eventually be available on demand. And also, but in person, not forgetting that an important part of people skills training is actually trying it out and being with other people as you try it out. So trying to make sure you have that full complement of learning. And then looking at employer paid training through your associations. Again, for example, we have a state Society for Human Resource Management. We have a national one. We also have local chapters. And so we make sure to offer at least 8 hours, approximately a month of training, development, or personal development opportunities for our folks. And a lot of those we will pick up through our trade association for particular departments. So Economic Development Department has its own Economic Development Association. They're going to go to a conference every year for 2 or 3 days and learn on specific topics. And then understanding all of us, thank you, having a telephone, that we all are learning in shorter increments. Our attention spans have shifted quite a bit. And so a 3 or 4 hour lecture that may have been possible 20 years ago just isn't feasible for most people. And again, if you have any pressures outside of that particular moment, be it you have a car in the shop and you're waiting to find out when it's ready or what's wrong with it, to a child that may be sick enough to have to come home from school, a block like that can be very problematic to work around. So having that shorter learning option, having it on demand, again, as we talked about before in the hybrid learning, and then touching all of our senses, that visuals are very important with a shorter attention span. We're going to remember a no sign much faster than we're going to remember, please don't step on the grass. Infographics and short topics. So infographics meaning that using a visual, that you're taking something and showing a simple 4-step process to how someone gets somewhere. Those type of infographics are easy to recognize. They're very English as a second language friendly because they're so visually oriented and they're process oriented. And again, when you're trying to offer trainings to your folks, keeping the topic short. So trying not to cover everything, but breaking it into bits and maybe only covering 1 or 2 sections if you're trying to get into something deeper. Part 2 will happen next Monday. And then essential for most workplaces now is understanding, again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, where folks understand that that is part of the culture of the organization, that they value that all of us are different people and we have different expectations, but also different contributions. And how, as a group, through training and development, can we make this a place where everybody feels valued and included? So I kind of think that covers it. And I'm definitely open to hear if anybody thinks I missed anything, because if you're dealing with something right now and you've talked to 4 other people and they are too, I'd like to crib that on my sheet in case I get quizzed on this another time.
Patrick, this is Wayne Davis. I had a quick question going back to references. What kind of value do you place on references on the application?
They can be hit and miss. Personal references can be very problematic because depending on the relationship with the person, they may have only encountered them in social settings or settings of festivity and wonder, and not in the trials and tribulations of some of our day-to-day work lives. So I tend to put more value on professional references. And there's a key reason why. References, I hate to say it, but again, workplace violence. I think we're aware it exists and it happens fairly frequently. That is a due diligence of an employer. That an employer can say, the person I brought in, I checked references. There has been no history of this that I could have been aware of. That removes a certain liability or presumption of liability on your part as the employer. The other thing is, you're going to hear most people are not going to want to be sued for defamation. So they might not flat out tell you that this person had terrible attendance. But what they may tell you is, They were here most of the time. And the pause and hesitation is what you're picking up on. So you as the hiring manager want to do references. You don't want someone else to do them because a lot of people are trained to give neutral references, but they can't help but be people where their voice and intonation betray something that might make you pause.
Thank you.
I see Tracy Goodson dropped in the chat box. Could you suggest some alternate ideas for employee retention?
Well, we did kind of cover employee retention in most of the areas, but I think alternate ideas for employee retention. One of the biggest ones is, what is the employee's development plan? If you've got the time, a large majority of your employees would appreciate at least once a year sitting down, and you can ask them to draft it, but giving them some type of framework of, here is where I'm at now, here, fill in the blank where I would like to be in 2 years. Here are some things I think would help me get there. And then you as the supervisor or employer sitting down and seeing where you can help fill that in and make it happen. So it's really an employee development plan, and they're time consuming, but they're very worthwhile once you're able to get into the swing of it.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't believe I have other questions in the chat box, but I'd encourage you. We have certainly a bit more time if you'd like to take this opportunity to ask questions to Patrick.
Kendall, do you see the question I just added?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Use your mic. Talk for me.
So these are lots of great things, lots of great ideas for retention and for employee well-being. I did work for a county government, and we were expected to bill our time at 70% towards projects, or say workable hours. That meant roughly everything above 70% would go to things like holidays, sick time, vacation, trainings, you know, whether it was EQ type classes or whether it was technical. We did not get well-being type of hours per month. But is there a general rule of thumb? I mean, you're in a larger organization. We're obviously in much smaller organizations, but I could see where one employee might say, I need to, you know, have a yoga class 4 days a week, and someone else, you know, might need something different. So questions are, what's kind of a realistic number in your world that you feel like, or do you all have a number where you tell an employee, like, this is reasonable, but you also have, you know, we have a job to do clearly, so there's only so many hours left that it's not that we don't want to provide these things, but they sure can add up quickly.
And I think that's a great question, and I think it's how it's organized. So when we sanction something, for example, the bike ride I mentioned, then that's going to go towards roughly 8 hours a month that folks would have for work time for alternate non-job related activities. That might be, they also want to, they might want to go to the General Services Employee Appreciation event because they have friends who work there. So there would be some flexibility for that type of work sanction connected item. On a personal level, so this person wants to build in yoga 4 days a week, that's where we would do flexing. That would not be typically paid time unless that's something we were sponsoring. So, and normally how we would sponsor those is it would be a brown bag yoga lunch. Bring your lunch, eat it on the way, and then have a 45-minute yoga class. and we might give you 15-minute travel time to and fro. But again, that typically is going to be something we sponsor. So we're able to offer it to everybody that can take advantage of it, and we design the parameters around that. I think if an employee came to me and said, I'd like to have yoga at 8:30 every morning, then I'd say, how would you like to arrange your schedule for that to still meet your office hours? Because we have to be available on our phone for a minimum of 8 hours a day.
So roughly that 8 hours a month or 96 hours a year. So out of the 2,080 hours, and then I think they're roughly around 100 and plus holiday hours a year. So that's already 200 hours out of your 2,080. And let's just say someone takes 2 weeks for sick leave or doctor's appointments, then that's another 80. So you're looking at, plus a vacation. So you're looking easily at around 300 to possibly 400 hours a year subtracted from that 2080. And that's why I was just trying to determine if your county had kind of a policy or a rule or general kind of, like I said, I worked for a large county before, and we were told, you really need to be billing at 70% towards projects. Because, so I didn't know if you all had anything like that, or you just, the 96 hours is kind of that catch-all.
Yeah, and it's not a written rule, it's just a general catch-all from the question I had previously, which is how many hours would we typically expect someone to be in non-job specific related training, etc. It'd be around 8. We do not do the billable hours except for certain positions like attorney positions, etc. They do bill by project. And they have to determine that because that's not the general county functions that operate that way. But again, I think for each manager would be able to, it's amazing to me, but there are people who can take 2-week vacation, take college classes with a flex schedule where they work late and they got it right in the middle. And they're also able to occasionally participate in different county functions and still produce more than people who are here every day, 40 hours. So if able, it's really to focus on what are you expecting people to get done.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer. The reason I ask is because a lot of our funding does come from sources where we have to account for our hours on timesheets because we're grant, many of our programs are grant driven. Not all of them, but many of them are.
Yeah, and just like a non-exempt person, that's going to change the calculation of what you can do. Because if your grant says 70% of this position's time has to be doing this, you definitely don't have that flexibility that you would with another position. Have I got any other questions?
I saw one dropped in there, Kathy Shamblin, if you wanted to address this a little bit more. It sounded like you were looking for examples of employee development plans for administrative and financial positions. Certainly dive in that deeper and help where possible, or if Patrick, you have some thoughts.
Could you repeat that for me?
Sorry, Sharon and Kathy Shamblin had some questions in the chat box about, and certainly not only directed to you, or district staffers, and we can certainly dive deeper into this afterwards, but examples of employee development plans for specifically an administrative or financial person.
Actually, the Google is a wonderful thing for that. You can get some basic outlines. It'll sometimes point you to different organizations that have those development templates already available for their employees. So for any easily identifiable position, normally you'll be able to find that online very quickly. generally, you're gonna outline from your job description what that position needs to be able to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do. And that's, if you were doing it from scratch, how you would put together the development plan. Well, this position has to process a lot of detailed, high volume financial transactions. So development wise, that might simply look as how many accounts payable does the person need to accomplish in a given year? How many accounts receivable do they need to complete in a given year? Look at what that position accomplished when it was filled last time, or with this person if they've been in the role for a while, and then look to see, well, maybe they don't need to develop in that area, but I need to give them a pat on the back because it's going very well. But where in the job description are we not doing what we've said the job needs to be doing? And maybe that's where you focus the development part of it.
Thank you. Definitely some ideas to pursue. I know we're after 5 o'clock, just briefly. I hope and certainly have talked with Patrick that this is not the last time. I know he's such a great resource that we hope we can bring him back as a trainer and continue to build this partnership. I appreciate today, Patrick, you laying the foundation and getting us thinking on a number of topics that needed a little stimulating at the district level and how we can grow our own staff and directors. So the conversation, I hope, doesn't stop here. If you have questions we haven't captured, keep them coming, and we'll certainly work with folks like Patrick and all to make sure we've got some additional guidance for folks. This is certainly, like I said, just the start of that, and the association recognizes in our strategic plan the need for additional training, the of HR training especially, and that was captured in the approved strategic plan in December. We've been working on it. It can't quite happen overnight, but Patrick really got the ground laid for us as we begin diving deeper in some of these topics. I also want to make sure is on your radar. Like I said, we'll hopefully have Patrick back for future ones, but on our calendar coming up is a May 9th training in Richmond at the Drury Hotel. On our website, you can see right here how to click and get more information, see a draft of. We've been really lucky that the speaker, Charlotte Jensen, who's an HR consulting manager for Gallagher HR, she'll be coming to talk about employment laws specifically. Y'all have had a lot of questions about FLSA and Disabilities Act, etc. This session to learn and understand not only districts, but where some of your questions are so that we can continue to build off of what Patrick has laid some groundwork for us. Hit our website, find out here how you can register. $1 for the first person, $75 for any additional, and registration is due by Friday, April 21st. Reach out to Shannon in our office if you have any questions or need help through the registration process. I'm there unless there are questions, and Wayne, you have any final comments?
Just like to thank Patrick. I think you hit a home run with, it's just, you covered so much material in a short period of time and generated a lot of questions. I'm sure people will get off this call and they'll get home and think of additional questions, but HR it's something that we've got to tackle at the state association. And I think one of the hardest things, and I think we shared this with you, Patrick, at the Colonial District, is when you have a voluntary board of directors managing paid staff, that's a kind of a unique situation, and all the tools that we can have at our disposal are very helpful. And we certainly appreciate, again, you taking your time to be with us this evening.
Well, thank you both to Kendall and to you, Wayne. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your folks, and no joke, like I said at the beginning, I think what you do is very important for everybody that lives in Virginia.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We'll be in touch. We'll learn how we can build on this together further. So thank you for starting us off.
All right, enjoy the rest of your meeting, folks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. Right, everyone, we will stop recording now. We will share a link for the recording with all those who registered. And